I'm really, really excited to be here with Simon Pickering from Dot to Dot Training and Consultancy. We're going to have a good conversation today. It'd be worth if you could just introduce what it is you do, what Dot to Dot Training Consultancy is, maybe a bit of a background, that sort of thing.
Gladly. So I guess my background by profession, I'm a youth worker, and so that was my sort of that was the job or career I went into when I left education. 20 years doing that. I could just giving away my age, isn't that my age now? Then did that for 20 years or so, 15, 20 years. And then 2015 started Dot to Dot Training and Consultancy. And initially I was kind of hesitant at first to even use the C word, consultant, because there's a certain connotation that comes with that. And I was very apprehensive about using that word. But broadly speaking, we created a company with the view to really support charities and social enterprises to thrive. And that falls into a number of sort of categories for us as a business. So one, we provide sort of training and away day facilitation, that sort of stuff that charities need, that chance to get away and talk about the organisation, talk about the work, where they're doing really well, where they're not, all of that sort of stuff. So that's our sort of training consultancy offer. We also provide evaluation and impact report services, which again led us down the pathway of starting to look at data and how we capture it and that kind of stuff. And then the third part of our work is really fundraising and supporting organisations to raise funds.
Oh, that's interesting. And you help with that fundraising process?
Yes.
Or you do it for them?
A bit of everything. So sometimes it's writing fundraising strategies. Sometimes it's somebody saying, can you come in and help us with this? Like we don't have to do corporate fundraising. Can you come in and do a session of training and help us think about how we start that process? So that's our sort of, our three core areas of business effectively for Dot to Dot Training and Consulting.
Yeah.
We started to work because the fundraising stuff led us into CRMs and charities saying, we need to buy a new CRM. Are there products that you would recommend or that you think we should go for? And that sort of led us down this path into the tech space, which is not an area I ever thought we would work in. But what we quite quickly realised is a lot of the clients and organisations we were working with, it was one of the areas where they needed an awful lot of support. A lot of charities were sort of saddled with systems that didn't work, didn't do what they wanted them to do.
Yeah. Very
expensive, very frustrating. Didn't talk to other systems that ran their back office, and that just generates inefficiency and just time away from actually doing the frontline work the charities ought to be focused in on. And so we started working in that space, advising charities around use of technology, how to select, get the right systems, how to choose partners and consultants to work with that will get you the product that you want or need.
A form of digital transformation, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So we've started working in that space, and we're in the process of sort of launching a secondary company that will take care of that. We've started to sort of implement people and migrate people into new CRM systems, and it's just a slight deviation from our main core business.
So it's like a very tech-focused incarnation of the core business.
So we're going to take some of those principles that we've got as a training consultancy company and adopt them over to the tech space and actually support charities around the tech side of their work and how to get the best out of it.
That's good.
So we were asked a while back to quote, and I'm not going to name the organisation or anything like that. We were asked to quote for building a API application that linked a charity's retail stores to their fundraising CRM system. Okay, so a one-time cost of developing this bridge that effectively makes the two systems communicate with one another without any humans needed to be involved. Okay, so a one-off cost, $5,000. Interesting viewpoint from the charity was, that's quite expensive. We don't think we can afford that, but we're going to employ somebody to do this for us. And me and my colleague working on this project together were sort of scratching our heads going, sorry, what? Hey, come again?
Are you employing them for a week?
So, and that's what we're coming up against. That was when we realised, you know what, we're really onto something valuable here. If we can help charities and organisations to understand technology better.
This is something I wanted to touch on myself, actually. Something that we've learned as we've been working more with non-profits and charities. We've found that a lot of the problems that they face, while there are some unique issues that that charities are in front of. There's a lot of similar issues that you have with small businesses as well. So some of the concerns and the abilities to collaborate, you talked about during the COVID period, it shined a positive light on what it is that you do. We were very much the same when COVID struck, and we were constantly learning about the regular sort of issues that businesses were having, things like the ability to work from home, to be able to do video calling with each other, for example, the use of Teams, collaborating, organizing the data, making sure that it's safe, making sure that it's secure. Charities have that problem too.
Yeah.
And it's like, you think, I don't know if you found this in your experience, your example, the anecdote that you give there was really, really good example of this. And it's like, the mindset is slightly different. A small business wouldn't go $5,000, I'll hire someone to do that. That's almost like an enterprise, large organizations thought processes and bits and pieces. And it's interesting that charities, might think that way, as opposed to the SMB approach, shall we say, of, okay, here's a problem, let's solve it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that thing about keeping your fixed costs without getting too sort of accountancy focused here.
Of course, yeah.
Keeping your fixed cost, your back office costs, as small as possible.
Yeah.
So we can do the actual work that makes a difference.
Absolutely.
For the cause that we're working upon.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we've started working, and effectively we're joining, I don't know a huge amount about it yet, but the Tech for Good movement. Mm-hmm. So it's a thing around actually how technology can be a force for good and for change. I'm by no means an IT expert and not claiming to be, but what I can do is help organizations go through a process that helps them to get the best possible solution for what they're looking for at the best possible price.
Yeah.
And not get, it sounds daft, doesn't it? But when people are purchasing IT, they sort of go, oh, that will do. Well, actually, no, this thing is going to run your whole organization probably for the next decade. It's a big investment in the sort of back office function. Don't just go, oh, that will do, we'll make it work. Actually, spend some time in that space of thinking about specs and thinking about
I suppose it's changing the mindset of and again, this is very much the same with businesses. It's changing the mindset away from a commodity and into an investment, and looking forward in terms of future proofing the organization. If this is going to make your lives so much easier now and in years into the future, changing that mindset around the commodity to an investment is so important, because it opens up so many doors. It opens up so many opportunities to work better. One of the hardest things we found is in terms of that approach is really demonstrating the benefit of saving time. You tend to find that if you can say it's going to be this much money, that you can justify that or not justify that, or whatever the process may be. But the idea, I mean, we did a piece of work with a client where we literally saved one member of their staff. They weren't a big customer. They didn't have a large organizational front. They were a team of, I think it was about 10 or 12. We made a change in their process by introducing Microsoft 365 and a back end process for that. And it saved one of their staff members about 4 hours a day. And it was like, we're going to save you 4 hours a day. Okay, that's good. But then once you've done it, you're like, oh, hang on a minute. Do you know what I mean? It's that sort of level of change can really, really benefit organizations. And particularly when it comes to charities, nonprofits, the mission, the reason that they exist, what it is that they're trying to do is so important. It's the driving force of that social enterprise. To save 4 hours a day of a staff member is like, that's huge, isn't it? That's a huge sort of difference. And it's like having that sort of understanding of the time saving not hiring that back end staff member to build this API, instead just spend $5,000, get it done, and away you go. Microsoft have got a fantastic offering for non-profits in terms of their donations, and also the reductions for larger scale requirements as well. So at the moment, Microsoft have got 10 free Microsoft Business Premium licenses, which covers we call it IT in a box. to have the business premium, it's got all of the elements of all the technical stuff behind the scenes that people don't really, people that aren't technical don't need to worry about. But it's got all of the fundamental requirements that an organization has, and it gives it away for 10 staff members. After you have 10, the reductions in price, I can't remember them exactly to the penny right this moment, but it is approximately 70 to 80% discounted, which is huge. If you imagine for an organization, for a business, the license pricing is around about the 18 to 20 pounds per user per month. So to have that 75 to 80% discounted, it's huge savings.
It's a sort of no-brainer, isn't it? It's a good offer, isn't it? So we spend a lot of time with organizations just effectively just sitting with them, reviewing what systems they've got, what they'd like to achieve, where their frustrations lie with the tech they've got and the kit they've got. Getting that in place and actually getting, you can't afford, I don't know, the new CRM, but actually if you cut another product that you're paying for that could come for free from Microsoft. And so part of this work that we're doing, this transformational stuff, is getting people on board with the right products and the right backbone. So your Microsoft basically brings down all of your costs. It's, if you're a charity and you're not using that, you really ought to be. And then from that, we're starting to free up budget that we can spend on the stuff that will add value. And we've been focused very much so far in this conversation about the back office stuff. And that's purposeful for me as a big part of this, because if we can get that at a rate that is is lower but also really good, we can then start to look at actually, how do we transfer tech over to our frontline services? So in a way, this back office stuff is first base in a way.
It's the foundation. It's the foundation of any organization. You've got to make sure that your data is protected and appropriately set up. It's organized in the right way. It allows you to collaborate with each other. It's the basics, really, of working in a team. You've got to be able to collaborate easily, but equally, you've got to make sure that it's safe. From there, you then have, after that back office is done, you're absolutely right, the things that you can then develop and move into. So Microsoft have got, I believe the requirements are, the biggest one is that you have to be registered charity within the UK. You have to have a registered charity number. That's the biggest requirement that they have. What they're offering is $3,500, obviously converted into the UK into the pound accordingly, of Microsoft Azure credits. Microsoft Azure is one of the biggest hosting companies. It's one of the biggest hosting services available. You can spin up services. You can create servers that act as file repositories. You can have databases running on them. It does require the technical back end to actually get started. It's very, very complicated. It's not one of these, here's your license, now off you pop, figure it out for yourselves. You do need the specialists to help deploy these things. But Microsoft are giving you their on the cloud hosted credits. Now this is for physical, so they charge by the minute in terms of actual resources, so virtual servers. So if you've got an organization that's got all these servers that are required, you can't get around them, you can't move everything onto SharePoint, for example. Maybe you've got a line of a business product, you've got a piece of software that has to be sat on the server. You can get rid of the server and you can host that service in Azure, and then Microsoft give you $3,500 worth, which is quite a lot, $3,500 over a 12-month period in credits for you to be able to host those servers or those services directly in the cloud. So the idea is to get rid of all of that old crap in the server room and put it onto the cloud, which is much, much safer because you can create so many other backup routines and failovers and bits and pieces like this. If the worst was to happen, it's much quicker. It means that anyone can access it from anywhere. You can create this sort of this cloud environment that does a little bit more than just the Microsoft products that you get as part of your business premium license. But yeah, just as an overall, it's Microsoft is giving you $3,500 worth of time to use their services. And then after the 12-month period, you can then reapply again.
What advice do you give to charities that are looking for specialist support? How do we go about figuring out whether this is a good deal, whether this person's got the right skills and expertise for what we need as a charity? What advice would you give on that front? Because I'm interested in that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because the first thing you have to do really is you have to look at your network and look at who it is that you know. There are digital transformation specialists, people such as yourselves. You'd be a good outlet as terms of signposting for these sort of things. The first thing I suppose you need to do really is to look at what it is you're trying to achieve. That's the first question, is what is it you're actually trying to achieve? What is considered the best outcome? The advice is always, whenever, whether it be speaking to us, speaking to yourselves, I'm always open to having conversations and having a coffee with them and starting that conversation as to whether we're the right fit or not. It's like, okay, let's see, what is it you're actually trying to achieve? That first question is crucial. What is it that's the right outcome? What is it that you're actually trying to achieve, so that you can then reverse engineer the process and see if it matches? You can sometimes find, working with, in the tech industry, it's, here's a solution. Now you work around just, your processes so that you suit it, rather than, it matching your requirements.
Yes.
It's quite easy to fall down that rabbit hole of, here's something off the shelf, now run with it. What's the most common solution that you find that you're recommending? I know you've mentioned CRM systems a couple of times so far. Is there a sort of a trend that you're finding that people are starting to show more interest in certain products or solutions than others these days?
Yeah, and there's a lot of organisations saying, actually, we need this to run lots of different parts of our organisation now, and we need it in one place. Whereas traditionally, you'd have a fundraising department that would have their own fundraising CRM.
Yeah.
You'd have your finance team with their own system, and you'd have other teams operating with their own platforms and what have you. As now people are going, the CEOs in the charities who are switched on are going, wait a second, I need a product that does all of this in one place. And also so we can move our people around, but they use the same system, so we can, the tech for good. There's so much that can be achieved with technology, with software, that, it feels like we're not quite sort of on top of as a sector right now.
It can be quite difficult sometimes translating. I think what the Microsoft licensing is a good example of a product that wasn't originally designed for charities. It wasn't built for that purpose, but it is translating, because a lot of organizations, businesses, whether they're businesses, charities, or whatever sector, have that universal need. But it's interesting to see some of the more specialist ones that are there for, whether it be donations specifically or some of the new ways. I remember in during lockdown, there was lots of creative ways that non-profits that I'd seen had adapted to, particularly around donations. Bits and pieces, because charity shops weren't open, and it was much harder for certain donation processes. Events weren't allowed to be held, quite difficult. And some of the development of some of the technology, whether it be through QR codes, they had some the contactless abilities in their shop windows, so people would walk past and then go beep, and then it's in the window. And I'm like, little creative ways of being able to then continue that process and help. It's fascinating how
that happened. The QR code. I mean, everyone thought it was
long dead.
Everyone thought it was long dead. It's had like this revival, but now
absolutely,
it's come full circle and it's back in mainstream. It's a really powerful bit of kit. So I think one thing I was really interested to know what are the key trends? I guess the question is this around security. Okay, so sadly, and this is something that really makes me furious, charities are huge targets for fraud and for scams, financial hacking, all of that. It's really quite tragic. So if anyone's out there and doing that sort of stuff, please stop, because it's just dreadful. But how do charities navigate that? What are the top tips for charities?
Absolutely,
being scam proof.
Brilliant. It's a brilliant question. Issue. It's a brilliant question, and I think the first thing to consider, much like my previous answer to the last question, is to just to pause and say, right, hang on. It's around attitudes towards technology. Getting away from it being a commodity and an investment is so important, because if you don't care about it, then that you're going to be low hanging fruit. Do you know what I mean? And there are a lot of organizations, not necessarily exclusively charities, but there are a lot of organizations that might not invest as much energy into security as others. They're the easy targets. They particularly are the easy targets. I mean, in terms of the basics is really the first thing you need to do. It's to take scope of where your information is. Your digital footprint is so vast as an individual as well as an organization. it's really, really important. The first step is to actually know where your data is. If you've got this, if you're an organization that took that free trial with Dropbox, and then you also had that one, you also set up OneDrive because you had a Microsoft account, and then Google Drive came along, and you've got some things over here, some things over there. The first thing you really, really must do as an organization is to take stock and go, where is everything? Who are all of my providers? Because it's always the ones that you forget that become the highest risk. Because if you don't apply any, practices to them, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The first thing really is to just scope out and go, okay, I need to figure out where everything is. That's the first thing any organization should do as a standpoint. From there, you need what you need to do is you need to make the decision as to what the best solution is for you, whether it be file sharing is a good example here. Email setups. There's lots of old technologies that people have got. IMAP and POP3 were technologies that were about before security was even considered when it comes to email, and there's still quite a lot of that around. A lot of web hosts give free mailboxes as part of it. I'm like, no, we need to really, really step up the game in that sense. But the single biggest recommendation, because there are quite a few of them, the single most impactful basic requirement, I would say, is turning multi-factor authentication, MFA or 2FA, everywhere. Have that on as a standard everywhere. Because I think there was a statistic that I was looking at not that long ago where it blocks, it's more than 50% of your defense. It's a single thing.
As high as 50%.
Absolutely. Wow, it's a huge impact. I mean, it's not perfect. It can, there are ways around it with working around social engineering and tricking people into providing some information. So it's not foolproof, but it is the single biggest positive change that you can apply to your organization, is to turn multi-factor authentication off or on.
Not off.
On. I misspoke. Turn it on and make that very, very clear. Absolutely everywhere.
Okay.
It's the single. There's lots of other bits and pieces that you can do. There is something that we're offering with small non-profit organizations that we're willing to do. Is a service that we offer is a security report. We have the ability to actually have a conversation with you, do a scoping session, a bit of an audit, should we say, a technical audit, and say, right, come on, we're going to ask you a bunch of questions. We're going to have a look at the setup, have a look at the network and bits and pieces. And there's a report that we can do, like with a traffic light system, to say, hey, here's all of the things you really need to worry about right now, if there are any, of course. And then here are some things that we'd recommend. And then here are some more information of things that you've passed or other considerations for the future. There are lots of IT companies that do offer that same sort of thing, but that's a really, really good first step.
So I think there's a few things that I wanted to share for people that might be listening for charities, if that was all right.
Yeah, by all means.
So I think there's the Tech for Good sort of movement. It's worth on LinkedIn and online, worth keeping an eye on. I've been really surprised how many professional advisors, experienced people are part of that network. So there's a real movement there.
So is this a social movement then? Is this something that you're finding on? You mentioned it being on LinkedIn. Is it a group, a tag, a hashtag?
Yes, and a group that you can become involved in. And it's got a mixture of tech, software developers. Like, it's a real community of people who are all behind this sort of concept of tech for good, that we can use the technology we're developing for social and environmental good, I guess. So that's one. And then there's also another website called Dovetail, which is really good, which a lot of we haven't talked about much on the web side of stuff, on websites and agency side of things. Dovetail have got a sort of directory of web developers, website builders, agencies who are all signed up for the sort of tech for good principles as well. So that's another good sort of tip for people, alongside the sort of back office Microsoft stuff that you've talked about as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which people need to get onto.
No, there's a LinkedIn Live event a little bit later in the month we're really, really excited about. It's Chris Lyons from Microsoft is going to be on our LinkedIn Live I've got a date here, at 4 p.m. on the 26th of September. Come on, Owen, get your words out. So the 26th of September at 4 p.m. We're going to be doing a LinkedIn Live with Microsoft's Tech for Social Impact lead, who's Chris. Chris is a part of that group, and he's doing all sorts of fantastic things with Microsoft, actually. Lots of training opportunities, lots of what he's trying to do is, Microsoft have got a really, really big social impact department. They've got a big budget that they're trying to just get as much of this technology out in front of charities. All of these donations, all of these free, this grant funding, all they're trying to do is to get all of this amazing resource and training opportunity and funding available to as many charities as they physically can. And naturally, your charity, people that run charities might not automatically go, oh, let's go speak to Microsoft about this one. You know what I mean? So people like us, we're trying to signpost these sorts of things, and the donations are donations that we're able to, the licenses we're able to work. We're a channel partner with Microsoft, so we can actually provide them those donations, and then we can signpost for the grant funding as well. But yeah, Microsoft have got a huge. They're doing so much at the moment, and I don't want to touch too much on all of the bits and pieces because that is the purpose of that next LinkedIn Live. So it'd be really good for you to come and have a watch on that one. But yeah, Microsoft have got a lot going on at the moment that they're really trying to focus on working with IT providers specifically to educate them, people like myself, to educate us in terms of how to help connect the charity with Microsoft in order to provide those donations and other really useful resources as well. But yeah, thank you very much for today.
Thank you, Owen.
Excellent.